We have heard the bulk of the arguments and the back and forth, but now we're going to allow each panelist to sum up his position with a 2-minute statement, beginning with the Seattle Chief of Police, Gil Kerlikowske. Chief?
Sure. I want to restate in the second sentence when I did my 7 minutes, I said there is no debate about people's right to own and possess guns. It is what the Supreme Court has defined as the reasonableness issue. John Lott told you that, well, people with concealed firearms rarely commit murders. Guess what? People that go through some type of check and go through a police department to get their concealed firearms permit don't go out and commit a lot of crimes. But he also used the same argument that, well, let me tell you that people wouldn't make the newspaper if you threatened somebody with a gun who was trying to rob you and it went off and it wouldn't even be reported. I can tell you that people with concealed firearms permits drive drunk with the gun in their holster in their car. People with concealed firearms permits in which we sent a clerk home because she issued one on a Monday, and on Friday when she was filing reports saw that the person had, after getting the permit, committed suicide with the gun within the same week. And one of our young women officers who talked a drunken woman out of a gun who was holding it to her head and her face and in her lap, and finally was able to wrestle it away, had just gotten her concealed firearms permits. None of those cases made the newspaper, so there are plenty of cases out there as an example. I think reasonableness should enter into this. It should be more than just being upright and not being blind to allow you to carry a gun.
Thank you. Chief Kerlikowske of Seattle Chief of Police speaking against the motion. Speaking for the motion in his summarizing statement, John Lott, Senior Research Scholar at the University of Maryland.
Thank you all again very much for inviting us here. It's a great pleasure to be here. You know, there are lots of things that affect crime. As I said before, I think police are the single most important factor. But we can deal with numbers on a lot of these things. We have anecdotal stories. The police chief just went through some. I advise you, you can go and check these things out. The Florida Department of issuing these concealed handgun permits has detailed records. You can go to their website. The Texas Department of Public Safety, if you just Google Texas Department of Public Safety, concealed handguns, they'll go through year by year and tell you how many permit holders have been convicted for driving under the influence of alcohol. And it's an incredibly tiny number that this happens. I'm not saying it's zero, but the rate at which people lose their permits for any type of firearms-related violation, he gave examples of that, you look state after state, is hundreds or thousands of 1 percentage point. Off-duty police officers in Florida were arrested and convicted at higher rates by about 4 times greater than concealed carry permit holders were arrested in Florida during the same period of time. And I want to respond to John Donahue's comments about D.C. It's not true whether you look at rates or you look at numbers that you're going to see the murder rates fall or robbery rates fall after D.C.'s handgun ban. It goes up in either case. It just goes up more with the rate. And when he says it falls, what happens is when you're just looking at the numbers are falling quickly before the ban and rising relatively slowly after. And what he does is compare the before average and the after average, and that makes it look like the before average is higher than the after average. So it looks like, well, that's falling, but it's just the average. If you look at year by year, you see it's falling slowly and then rising faster afterwards. There's no way you can break down these numbers and not see that D.C., Chicago, England, Jamaica, Ireland, other countries which have banned guns have not seen increases in violent crime rates afterwards. And D.C. just didn't rise relative to what it was before. It went from being 15th to 1 or 2 in the country.
Thank you, John Lott. Summarizing his position against the motion, John Donahue, economist and professor of law at Yale.
Again, the D.C. case is the case of a city that was massively depopulating with its most affluent citizens leaving at the time. Steve Levitt, the author of Freakonomics, is a John Bates Clark Award winner, sometimes described as the Junior Nobel Prize in Economics. He dismissed John Lott's More Guns, Less Crime theory in his books, writing, when other scholars tried to look at this work, they found that right-to-carry laws simply don't bring down the rate of crime. We have heard the discussion in the United States. There are many features of the United States that would suggest we'd have one of the lowest rates of violent crime. Rich countries in general have low rates of violent crime. We're the richest. We have more people in prison than any other country in world history. In fact, no European country has even half the level of incarceration rate that we have. Yet our crime rate is phenomenally high, and you hear the proposition is that more guns would reduce crime. We have 42% of the world's guns in civilian hands in the United States. How many more would we need to get down to the level of crime of our European allies? They mentioned Switzerland and Israel. Again, these are completely an opposite. Switzerland has a regime in which individuals are in a militia. They take home an assault weapon, and they are given a locked container of ammunition that they're not allowed to open up. They have to repeatedly come to headquarters and show that they haven't opened it up, and if they have, they're put in jail. In Israel, they do put you in jail if you lose your gun. This is the problem. They keep ignoring the fact that millions or between 500,000 and 1 million guns are stolen every year. That means a gun in a criminal's hands. Even if it's keeping you epsilon safer by having a gun, when your gun gets turned over to a criminal, that's making everybody else more unsafe. So it doesn't matter what happens to the right to carry holder and what he did. It matters what happens to the gun that he got that then got used by a criminal to kill someone else.
Thank you, John Donahue. Summing up his position for the motion, Guns Reduce Crime, Stephen Halbrook, attorney representing the NRA in several lawsuits.
Thank you, John. I want to respond to two things that Professor Donahue has stated. In the Heller case, the Supreme Court decided that the Second Amendment guarantees the individual right of individual citizens to keep and bear arms, including handguns. That's the position that the NRA has taken for many, many decades of its history, since 1871. And Mr. Donahue said that the NRA does not tell the truth on the Second Amendment. Well, then the Supreme Court doesn't either, because that's what the Supreme Court held in the Heller case. And if you walk out back and you go to the book stand here at this auditorium, you'll see a book called The Founders' Second Amendment, which I authored. It's a new book on the history of the Second Amendment, and you'll see basically agreement with what the Supreme Court held, that it is an individual right, that the NRA did not make it up. In addition, I've been to Switzerland many times and participated in shooting matches with military rifles, and you can buy all the ammunition you want at the shooting ranges and at gun shops. You're issued a tin of ammunition that you're not allowed to open because they want it to be available if the militia army has to be mobilized. But there's no restriction on your ammunition usage or purchases. So every Swiss male, when he enters age 20, is issued a military assault rifle, and he keeps it at home. And there's an extremely low crime rate in Switzerland. And the remaining thought I would like to say in favor of the proposition is I would like everybody to kind of think about yourself. You've heard here tonight that we're all potential murderers, that if we get angry, if we have a gun, we're going to kill somebody. It's just not true. Most people with these concealed weapon permits are just like you and me. They're normal people. They don't just suddenly get angry or have a couple of glasses of wine and go on murderous sprees. We're not like that. Most Americans are good people. They can be trusted with guns, and they should be trained. Children should be trained in gun safety. But to somehow act like we're all potential criminals is just completely beyond the pale.
Thank you, Stephen Halbrook.